What is going on, my crazy 76er fanatics? Guys, thanks for stopping back in for another daily pod with your daily 76er discourse, discussion, and information, guys. For all of you who stop in, who drop in, who like, who comment, subscribe, every one of you matter. Thank you for helping us climb that subscription ladder. We appreciate everyone who's helping us, helping this channel grow. And guys, we got to talk about the most talked about conversation in the Sixer locker room. There's a strong belief between Joel, between Tyrese, between all the other players that the East is wide open for the taking. Basically meaning there's not one, there's not two, there's not three dominant teams in the East where you know they're going to be a beast this entire season. You're looking at the East as open can be. That's what Tyrese is saying. That's what Joel is saying. Truthfully, that's what Daryl Morey's trying not to say, but is saying. And if the East is as wide open as these players are highlighting, why is that? We have to look at it, guys. So just last season alone, two teams in the East had 60 games or more. 60 games is a tough feat, especially out of 82. You're winning like over 70% of your games. If you win 60 games, you're winning over 70% of your games. The Boston Celtics, the Cleveland Cavaliers were the only two teams in the East that won over 70% of their games. One of those teams in Boston is completely reconstructed. And one reason I don't believe that Boston's going to be nearly as good or anywhere close to good is because Al Horford, a lifetime Celtic, decided to depart and go to Golden State. Al Horford refuses and has no interest in re-signing with the Boston Celtics, a team that, hey, home is where the heart is, and Al's heart stays in Boston. But his body and his work and his talents are all going to the West Coast and for Golden State. That just leads me to believe that Boston, who doesn't have Tatum, doesn't have Porzingis, doesn't have Drew Holiday, and now doesn't have Al Horford, doesn't have an identity, doesn't have their identity from the last two seasons. If you think this Celtics team is going to be anywhere close to 60 games, I think you're insane. This Celtics team may not even make playoffs. I feel like they'd be lucky to make play-in. I think what the Celtics are going to encounter this season is the same thing the Sixers faced last season, a rude awakening, a brutal, eye-opening event where this team starts going on a losing streak. And Joe Mazzulla, who I'm not going to say Joe Mazzulla is a bad coach, but with the way this team is constructed, with the pieces and the center talent this Boston Celtics team has, Joe Mazzulla is going to have to be a great coach to get this team over the hump and into the playoffs. I think you look at the Celtics as a team that's bound to fall off. You got another team that made the playoffs and a top four seed, the Indiana Pacers, who just lost the face of their franchise, one of their all-stars, and definitely the focal point of their offense in Tyrese Halliburton. Listen, the Milwaukee Bucks, Giannis Antetokounmpo is a great player, but his health can also start to be questioned because Giannis has been struggling to finish season strong and enter playoffs healthy. On top of that, they don't have Dame Dollar anymore. They lost their identity with Chris Middleton. The championship squad with, again, Drew Holiday, Drew Ford, he's not in Milwaukee either. Guys, you're looking at least three teams from last season. We have multiple reasons to believe they won't be good. Like, arguably, they could be bad. Celtics, I'm arguing, will be bad. They're a play-in team or a missing playoff team at best. The Pacers, I love Pascal Siakam. I love what this team has grown. I love the identity between the young group. And truthfully, they're only missing one star in Tyrese Halliburton versus Boston, who's missing potentially four key players. I think Pacers still find a way to make playoffs, but I think they find a way to dip in the standings from the fourth seed of last season to maybe another play-in team or maybe the sixth, seventh, eighth seed. And, of course, those Milwaukee Bucks, you have Doc Rivers being your coach. You have Giannis Antetokounmpo being the leader of that team. But besides that, you don't really have any true guard play. You don't necessarily have a real reliable center play outside of Miles Turner. The depth on this team just isn't there. Guys, the Bucks, because they have Giannis, one of the best players in the league, I'm going to say they make playoffs. But last season with Giannis and Dame, they had the fifth seed. I'm going to say they make playoffs, but I can argue they also find their way into the play-in once again. That's three teams last season, guys. Three teams who avoided the play-in, who got guaranteed playoff spots, who are arguably taking huge dips and huge dives this season. So when we talk about the East, we can say that the East is wide open, wide open. And one thing about this Sixer team that we got to highlight, because this is also breaking news in the Sixer locker room, They are adding talent. They just, according to Keith Pompey, we have to say according to Keith Pompey because sometimes you love Keith, sometimes you hate Keith. But one thing about Keith is that he's a reliable source for all of your Sixer truth and all of your Sixer news. According to Keith Pompey, this Sixer team has intentions or does plan to sign or already has Imani Bates, Kennedy Chandler, Malcolm Hill, and Jalen Martin. A lot of these players, guys, are hopeful prospects that could become, I'm talking about steady names in the NBA. One name I wanted them to sign or find a way to acquire would be Blake Henson, former Pitt prospect, leader in three-point percentage in the G League. We can talk about him later. But Imani Bates, guys, is the name that you guys can't forget. Because the biggest question mark, conundrum, or problem Sixer fans had is that this team did not draft Ace Bailey, a 6'10", 6'9", Kevin Durant makeup, long, strong, knockdown, tough shot maker, tough shot taker. That is what Ace Bailey brings to any team that Ace Bailey's going to be on. You're looking at him like Paul George, looking at him like Kevin Durant, because the shots he wants to take and the shots that he happens to make are similar to those tough shots of Paul George, of Kevin Durant. That's exactly what Imani Bates brings. Questionable shot-taking ability, questionable shot-making ability, but also a high efficiency at high difficult shots. Imani Bates, guys, is everything you were looking for in Ace Bailey, from the stature, from the mentality, from the wingspan. I think Ace Bailey may be a lot better defensively. I think that's one thing Ace has over him, some defensive chops. But one thing Imani Bates has over Ace, that's experience in the NBA. So maybe Imani Bates has a better chance of getting defensive stops in the pros than a rookie. One thing about Imani Bates, man, he brings to this team a good knockdown three-point shooter, a fearless scorer, a relentless worker. Honestly, a high ceiling player. If this team is able to carve out a role and carve out a spot on this roster for Imani Bates, you're looking at a guy who can truthfully play the 1, play the 2, play the 3, and gosh darn it, the rhyme of all time has been if Imani Bates decides to eat the weights, why can't he play a stretch 4? If Imani Bates, a 6'8", 6'9", 6'10 shooting guard, if Imani Bates eats the weights, hits the gym, and gets trim, why the heck can't Imani play a stretch 4? He can. Truthfully, guys, Imani is as raw of a product and a prospect as any player you decide to draft because he hasn't gotten his real opportunity in the NBA. He also has seen his game develop and change as he has been growing and developing in the G League. He's becoming a better shot maker. He's becoming a smarter shot taker. He's not necessarily becoming a better teammate and passer and floor general, but those are things that you decide to do when you have to. The G League is about getting your buckets, getting your name on the map, and getting your game displayed. The NBA is about winning games. When it comes down to winning, I expect Imani Bates to go back to his winning ways, which is, guys, competing. I think one thing Imani Bates brings to this team that you need for this team, which is a key for this team's success, is competition. I think he's the perfect piece, the perfect acquisition, and the perfect puzzle piece to match some of these holes, some of these deficiencies, and some of these positions and opportunities this team could be lacking. Size is one of these things this team is lacking. Yes, they have shooters, Jared McCain. If Quentin Grimes decides to re-sign, Quentin Grimes, Tyrese Maxey, Eric Gordon's a shooter. Kyle Lowry's only good at shooting at this point in his career. But Imani Bates brings size to that shooting arsenal, to that shooting depth chart. Imani Bates also brings youth, speed, excitement, hustle, also hunger, competition, guys. The key for this team this season is that they're going to compete, not on the stat sheet, not on the box score, not with the names on the roster. They're going to compete every day in the gym. And a guy like Imani Bates, who wants to be great, who works every day in the gym to be the best player in the NBA, and truthfully has the mentality that he is one of the best players in the NBA, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Guys, you need guys who are willing to compete, guys who are going to compete, and do it every day, night in and night out. This is exactly why he's a key piece to this team, because the key for this team is the identity, the culture, the mindset, and the mentality that Tyrese Maxey is bringing. Imani Bates can be great on this Sixer team because they have a lot of openings for guys with size and offensive efficiency. The key for this team is compete and don't be beat. A guy like Imani Bates embodies that mentality, embodies that culture. I think he's a perfect acquisition. A perfect acquisition. And one of my favorite acquisitions all offseason from Daryl Morey. I don't care that it's an Exhibit 10. I don't care that it's basically a 10-day contract. I don't care that it's basically a training camp contract. Daryl Morey's been able to do it before, and if Imani Bates shows out, Daryl Morey will do it again. He'll make something work. Mind you, this team also has one open roster spot. They have Andre Drummond, a cap contract they are trying to move off of. They have a lot of potential movable pieces. If potentially they can say, Eric Gordon, we signed you, but we are happy to make this dead money, dead cap space. Let's sign Imani Bates. Who knows what Daryl Morey would decide to do, but I can tell everyone, guys, if you want to talk about it, you got to leave a comment. If you want to have your voice heard, you got to leave a comment, guys. Did you like? Did you comment? Did you subscribe, guys? Because some of these comments, they're not going to like it. Billy Goldshell says, stop with the guards. This team needs forwards, taller, done with the guard stuff. Now, he may not like this episode, okay? Bill Goldshell. You may not like the signing of Imani Bates, but I'll say Imani Bates is a 6'8 shooting guard who, again, can play 1 through 4, and it all depends about who he can guard, which expectedly should be 1 through 3. The more guard depth you have, the better this team is at scoring. One thing that you won't have ESPN highlight is that the greatest teams in the NBA have a strong guard. To not want a strong guard, to not want a strong collection or depth chart of guards, just means you don't want one of the best teams in the NBA. Strong guard play is how you have a stronger team. On top of that, the better guards, the more tradable pieces and assets you have. You obviously don't need all 5 guards, but you definitely can move off of 1, 2, or 3 to get some draft picks, some centers, or some front court help. There's a surplus of good guard play on the open market right now. And if Daryl Morey is able to hit some home runs and get some strikes with these guards he decides to sign, he can then take those scoring players, scoring pieces, and move them to other franchises and teams. That's what the game is all about, guys. That's really what the game is all about. I hear you, but why would the Kings give LaVine for Paul George? The only reason the Kings would give LaVine for Paul George is because Paul George could still potentially be an all-star, because the Kings know that the Western Conference is one of the best conferences. It's one of the tougher conferences, but they still don't have an identity. Apparently, Sabonis doesn't want to be there. DeMar DeRozan is not sure if he's going to stay there. Zach LaVine thought he was going to get a brand new team that was going to compete for the playoffs, but they're not competing for playoffs. Zach LaVine wants to go. Paul George, at this point in his career, can only argue for money's sake because that's what he signed on for. If the Kings are basically going into a full rebuild, which they never committed to, Paul George could be the perfect acquisition piece to still find your way to compete and get first-round talent, first-round picks from the Sixers. That's why you take Paul George, because you want to rebuild, but you also want to be good. I also want to highlight that they say the Sixers need a center. This Sixers squad could use a center, but that's only if Joel Embiid isn't a healthy center. Guys, like, comment, and subscribe, guys. We love you guys for all of your comments, all of your support, and all of the guys who watch, who subscribe. Guys, like, comment, and subscribe. If you leave a comment or two, we read more than a few. And thank you all for helping this channel grow. Appreciate everyone.